Hello, you're watching another episode of Deep Dive with me, Vineet Malhotra. A key highlight of Donald Trump's administration, especially his second term, has been his vocal dislike for the existing global groupings. He has openly criticized G7 for kicking Russia out. And well, his thoughts on Europe? Well, he made it pretty clear in this interview with Politico. Listen in.
I think they're weak, but I also think that they want to be so politically correct. I think they don't know what to do. Europe doesn't know what to do. They don't know what to do on trade either. I mean, I look at a lot of the trade, situation that's going on over there. It's a little bit dangerous, but Europe, they want to be politically correct, and it makes them weak. That's what makes them weak.
It sounds like you want to see some pretty massive changes.
Well, I think they should get the people out that came into the country illegally.
I want to ask about NATO.
If you take a look at Sweden, so Sweden was known as the safest country in Europe, one of the safest countries in the world. Now it's known as a very unsafe, pretty unsafe country. It's not even believable. It's a whole different.
Well, Politico has now come out with a new article that claims that an idea has been floated in Washington to make a new grouping that would bring global superpowers together despite them being traditional adversaries and offer a sharp contrast with the existing G7. Here's how this new grouping, the Core 5 or C5, could look. United States of America, China, Russia, India and Japan. The combined nominal GDP of the United States, China, India, Russia and Japan is a staggering economic figure in 2025. And according to the latest IMF and Economic Outlook data, the United States GDP stands at approximately $30 trillion and China is at 19.4 trillion. India roughly at 4 trillion, Japan's near 4.3 trillion and Russia is around 2.5 trillion in nominal terms. Summing these estimates yields a total of approximately $60 trillion in combined output from these five countries. When compared to the size of the global economy, which IMF data place at about 117 trillion nominal GDP in 2025, these five nations alone account for more than half, which is 52% of the world economic output. A concentration of economic power not seen since the post-war World War II era for a single group of nations. This immense share highlights their central role in global markets, trade, investment flows and macroeconomic trends, reinforcing how movements in the economic conditions of these five countries can ripple across the globe. In contrast, the group of seven, which is the G7, historically the advanced industrial economies, has a somewhat different composition amidst economic impact. The G7 includes the United States, Japan, Germany, United Kingdom, France, Italy and Canada. Of the five countries in our anchor group, the US and Japan are G7 members, while China, India and Russia are not. But even with just two large economies, the G7 still collectively accounts for a significant portion of global GDP at about $49 trillion. The Core 5 will still be significantly higher at $61 trillion. Finally, when viewed through the lens of the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue or Quad, a geopolitical grouping rather than a formal economic bloc, the economic implications of membership are usually notable. The Quad comprises the United States, Japan, India, Australia, with the explicit goal of enhancing regional security, economic cooperation and supply chain resilience in the Indo-Pacific. Although Russia is not part of the Quad, the other four or our five country set minus Russia plus Australia represent a powerful economic cluster. Official data from Quad economic summaries indicate that the combined GDP of Quad countries stands at $34 trillion. Although Core 5 is not a direct parallel, it is about double, signaling the economic power it would hold. If you combine the population of the Core 5 nations, it would come to about 3.49 billion people, roughly 43% of the world's population, thanks to India and China. With India and China alone accounting for over 2.8 billion people, the addition of the US, Russia and Japan further amplifies the scale and diversity of this group. Just for the sake of the interest value this holds, if you combine the military might of the five countries, you are talking about roughly 16.1 million total military personnel, a defense budget of roughly $1.42 trillion annually, and 24,000 military aircraft, 300 plus deployable combat vessels. And according to Politico, the White House has denied the existence of this document, with Press Secretary Hannah Kelly insisting that no alternative, private or secret version of the 33-page official plan actually exists. But if this was, or if this is the image, wasn't enough to make Europe feel angry, any thought of US going ahead with the Core 5 proposal will not be taken well by any of its European partners, since it would be a direct acknowledgement of US envisioning a future where Russia holds more influence over them. Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, joins us now on the broadcast to talk more about this. Professor Nalapat, it's all right, it's a good idea if there is a formulation of a C5, but what about the existing groupings, sir? How about Donald Trump uses his muscle to fix the United Nations?
Look, I'm not going to get into such issues, but I'd like to point out that in my view, one country is not really or should not really be a part of Donald Trump's vision, and that is China. The fact is that China is an adversary, in a direct contest with the US. It is fighting for supremacy over the US, and if it achieves that, the US economy will be in a shambles. China also is an adversary, an overt adversary of India and Japan. There's no question about it. So in my view, it's a wonderful idea, but it should be a G4. Like you have a Quad 4, you have a G4, and China should be kept out because China doesn't belong to a grouping like this. And bringing Russia in, I think it's a great idea because I think some of the European countries have not been entirely wise in making Russia an enemy. It has drawn them ever closer to China, the first point. And second point is you can't ignore a country with half the size of Europe and half the size of Asia combined. So the reality situation is bringing Russia on board is a very good idea. India on board is a very good idea. I would draw the line at that. And Japan, of course, definitely, but not China, in my view. I think that would be a mistake because the Chinese and the Americans are in direct competition with each other, and there'll be a huge clash of interests. Barring that, it's an excellent idea. It's an amazingly good idea from Donald Trump.
All right, Professor Nalapat, it's also important to understand that the White House so far has not confirmed to such a plan existing. Do you think that in actuality, this is a great idea and the countries who are mentioned as a part of the C5 should actually work upon something like this?
Well, as I said before, in my view, it should be the 4, not the 5. If you bring in the 5th country, like China, the whole thing gets completely scrambled up because the Chinese are in direct kinetic conflict with India, not just one but on several occasions. They are now openly challenging Japan over Japanese airspace, and of course Japan has stood resolute, and US bombers, I'm happy to say, are flying along with Japanese bombers. There's no question that it would be a good idea to bring Russia in back from the cold because Europe is making a huge mistake in making Russia the enemy and ignoring the real problem in the room, which is China. So I think this is an idea which needs a certain amount of modification in the sense that there should be 4 powers and not 5. But otherwise, it's an absolutely brilliant idea, and I would strongly feel it's an idea that needs to be carried out in reality. Thank you.
Professor Nalapat, always a pleasure having you, sir. Thank you so much for speaking with NewsX. We take a short break on that note. We'll be right back.